Okay, everybody, welcome to the Learning Revolution's Micro School Summit, the first summit that we are holding to discuss what micro schools are. This is a breakout session that's going to be led by Henry Readhead, who is the grandson of A.S.Neill, the founder of Summerhill School in the UK. Henry, I believe you're the principal, you are doing some sort of principling of Summerhill. And I know, go ahead.
I'm the deputy principal, actually. Yes. So my mother Zoe Readhead is still the boss, and it will take a while before that changes. I think she's still the boss.
Okay, I am going to drop the screen share so that we can see everybody. Hang on one second, and then that way. Stop recording. I can't figure out how to turn off the screen sharing because Steve had it set up. So let's see here. Try one more time. I think it's just set up that it's going to be that way. So Henry, let's just have you go. I don't think it's a big deal that it's showing that screen, and we won't worry about it.
Well, I think if I try to do it,
okay.
Wait a minute, let's just have a little look at something here to see whether this works, because that might cut it off. And then I can stop the sharing, and maybe that'll
perfect. There we go.
There we go.
Excellent. So welcome, Henry. Welcome everybody who's joined us. If you haven't opened up your chat, please do that so that you can talk with Henry, pose your questions as you're thinking about them, and take it away. Henry, you're going to tell us all about Summerhill. I'm excited.
Yeah, well, thank you all for coming, everybody. Generally, what happens about Summerhill all the time is that there's always lots of questions. So what I will do is I'll just talk a little bit about the school, give you a bit of information just in case if it's something you haven't heard much about, and a little bit of an idea of how the structures work and where our focuses are with Summerhill. And then, but please do ask questions, and I'm up for conversation. I don't like it to all be all one directional. So yeah, so my grandfather, A.S.Neill, founded Summerhill School in 1921. It's the oldest children's democracy in the world, or the oldest known children's democracy in the world. My grandfather really believed in educating the whole child, that it's fundamentally just as important, if not more important, to be fulfilling the social and emotional well-being of the child, as well as supplying an area of learning and a very relaxed and nice learning environment. And so, yeah, just a little bit of basic information. So we have children from 5 years old up to 18 years old. We're internationals. We have children from all over the world. And we are a boarding school, but we're not all boarding. We do have day pupils as well. So sort of a fifth or a sixth of the school are day pupils. Now, really, fundamentally, the main philosophy of Summerhill School is that children have the freedom to choose whether to go to lessons or not. And this is absolute all the way through their whole time. And what this means is that children can spend as much time as they like playing. And when I say play, I mean free play. A.S.Neill believed very much that play belongs to the child, and that it's a time for them to be really as Gina was talking about before, in intrinsic motivations, listening to themselves, fulfilling their needs very naturally, and play is what happens at Summerhill. It's the most wonderful thing. It's the most wonderful thing, and I think to a certain extent the boarding element of this makes it also very interesting, because it all happens as part of living. The pace at Summerhill is very relaxed, and the children are they're being very instinctive. They're relaxing in their environment, and they're responding And what this means is fundamentally children will play and play and play and play, and then the other parts start to kick in. You know, the interests, those natural kind of thirst to learn. Learning is not something that is given to people. We're all that's what we do as children. We learn and we fulfill. We're programmed to fulfill our childhood. So the actual communities, so the community aspect of Summerhill School is also very, very important. That all of us, adults and children, the children of all different ages, all live together in a community. And this community is, we have democratic meetings where we make the decisions about our day-to-day life, where we create laws about how we, and this is how we live together as a community. And it's a very important part of the process at Summerhill, because children, to a certain extent, they need to have things clear and simple for them. So I'll give you a little example of this. We had a trampoline come to Summerhill School, and as you can imagine, there's a lot of attention to the trampoline from the adults. Obviously, all the teachers. In the end, we ended up jumping up and down on the trampoline all day. No, it got a lot of attention from the children at the school, and it created a lot of conflict. And so children were quite quickly to be saying, actually, no, it's my turn. I want to have a go. No, you've been on there longer than me. I want to have a go. And it was, and so we took the trampoline to the meeting. Actually, sorry, no, wait a minute, I'm going to retract that. We didn't actually take the trampoline to the meeting. That would be the best meeting you've ever known in your life. We discussed the topic of the trampoline in the meeting. And we came up with some laws. And for example, one of the laws is you're not allowed to wear shoes on the trampoline. And one of the other laws that we created was that you are free to use the trampoline as much as you like, but if someone else comes and wants to go on the trampoline, then you have 5 minutes and you have to give it to someone else. You have to let someone else have a go. Now, we're a community that runs on freedom, not license. Fundamentally, it means you have individual freedom, but you have to also, it comes with responsibility, and that responsibility is to other people as well. And this creates the beautiful equality that we have at the school. And so this is how this works. So then if there's a 15-year-old who's jumping on the trampoline, and if a 6-year-old comes along and says, I want to have a go, then the 16-year-old will have 5 minutes, and they have to get off and let someone else have a go. Now, this is obviously explaining this in very simple terms, but this idea is actually at the fundamentals, the foundations, 100 years of philosophy of Summerhill School. This has been at the heart, absolute heart of the community. And so what this means then is that that there's a sense of rights straight away. That a 6-year-old, if an older person, an older child, broke the law, or even a teacher actually broke the trampoline law, then the child would take it to the meeting and say, I'm bringing this up in the meeting because this person broke the trampoline law. And it makes it very, very simple and very, very clear for the children. So it's a system that works very, very well. The conflict resolution, again, is done within the meeting process. It's done through discussion, but also sometimes a little fine might be implemented. For example, in these circumstances, there might be a 24-hour trampoline ban imposed, or something down that kind of line. Now, this sort of thing, it's purely about the it's not a personal thing. So we don't class them as punishments, because it's not about you being a bad person. It's just about you doing something that's against the law or against someone else's rights to a certain extent, and that person didn't like it. So I'm sort of explaining, I hope this is clear. It's always quite difficult to explain it in full terminology, but I just to kind of paint you a little bit of a picture of how it works. But this philosophy is what we run the whole school on. So the school has probably close to 400 laws, and that does very often people go, okay, there's nothing free, there's no freedom in 400 laws. But don't worry, these are small laws, like whether you can wear shoes on the trampoline or not. And there are also many of these laws are not implemented to everybody. And they're always made by the whole community. These laws are never imposed by adults or teachers, are never imposed by management or anything like that. These laws are our day-to-day living, and they're all made by everybody. And this is a very, very important part of that process to a certain extent. Ever eliminated over time? Yes. Mara, lovely question. Yeah, so absolutely. The laws at Summerhill, and to a certain extent, this is actually what has created, to a certain extent, the beauty of the longevity of Summerhill School. I'm going to explain this a little bit, actually. Because we give children the freedom, and what we're doing to a certain extent is we're creating an environment that very much is actually led by the children at the time of the way they're living instinctively, intrinsic motivations. They're living instinctively, they're following their interests all the time. And what this means is, and they're creating laws, and they're sometimes changing laws when they're not working. They're dropping laws when they're not useful anymore, or if people disagree with them, they might bring it in, not really as a big fighting dispute, but a conversation. Do we need, I don't know if this is working very well because of this reason. What do people think? And it's very, very organic. These 100 laws, 400 laws have changed very much over time. And what's so beautiful about it is you might have a law that sticks for a few months and then disappears. It wasn't to work. But then you have some laws that have been around for 30 plus years. And obviously in a community that evolves so much, they work very well. They're good quality common sense when living in a community. So they're very valuable in these sort of situations. So it's a very, and what this also means is, to a certain extent, over 100 years, Summerhill evolves with the world around it. New trends come in, different things happen. For example, really obviously the most interesting example is around screens, is around computer games. Back 30 years ago, the Intellivision or the little computer games would turn up, and over time, this developed into being devices, phones, and you know, we all know, I won't go into the detail, we all know how phones impact everybody's lives nowadays. So the school community and the children take these things and they come into the community and they try things out. Is this working? They first of all have freedom, and they realize, no, maybe they should have some restrictions. And anyway, this is a constantly evolving process, and it's a very powerful thing. And what it means is that Summerhill is absolutely at the forefront of what is happening for children today. And that's something that's very, very powerful, and it will be tomorrow. And that's something that's a very beautiful part of Summerhill. So I can see there's going to be other questions, and I always have a tendency to keep going and talking a lot as well. So I'm going to explain to you just a little bit about the learning at Summerhill and how the learning happens. This is a very important part. So before that, sorry, just a couple of minutes on community life. Community life, the philosophy of freedom, not license, freedom with responsibility, is individual, and it's relationship. So me and you, Joe, or any of us here, it's about us as individual, as how we relate to each other and respect each other. But freedom, not license, is also to community, that actually the community supports us, it's there for us, but at the same time, it needs to be run. It needs responsibility within the community. And this is a very, very powerful thing that children experience. Not necessarily that A.S.Neill thought we need to put this in place because it's what children need. It's what naturally evolved that we know that children need. And that's what's so beautiful about it, is that as they get a bit older, when they're little, we all know children are bumbling around in the world of imagination and doing all the beautiful things that children do. But as they get a bit older, they start to get, there's always a time when they're pushing boundaries a little bit. They're learning about what boundaries are, and they're pushing boundaries a little bit. But there's a time when actually natural maturity, natural independence starts to come in, and they start to feel the fact that I'm actually responsible for other children, the younger ones. I'm now a bit older, and I now need to care for them, and it's a very natural process. And so the freedom not license works very, very well within that process as well. And so when the children getting older, 15, 16, 17, they're helping younger children to resolve conflicts, they're putting people to bed at night, they're running their school, they're hosting meetings, they're having committees, they're organizing shops, they're doing all of these amazing things. Yeah, so this is a very important part of it. So now, then moving on to the learning process. At Summerhill, as I said, non-compulsory lessons. The first thing that's fundamental, and if you look formally on our curriculum at Summerhill School, the first thing that is there is free play, and as much as a child wants. That is fundamentally the most important thing, that the child can fulfill whatever those needs are. So sometimes, and this often gets people a bit worried, sometimes a child may come to Summerhill and may not enter a single lesson until they're 13, 14 years old, maybe not even learning how to read and write until that time. The most important thing is that the children, when they start to learn, when they get those interests, they're doing it internally. They're doing it because they want to be doing it. They've got reason to be doing it rather than it being imposed upon them. So this is a very, very important part. So the education at Summerhill School is to cater for this. Children, free play, and the primary department at Summerhill School is all open space all the time. We've got teachers available, we've got amazing, lovely, lovely projects that are happening, but the children all the time can choose whether they go or not. And that's where the power is. And it means straight away that they'll jump in a classroom, they'll do some bits and pieces, they might get really interested in trying to do a bit of learning and a bit of, following a bit of, to sort of actually start reading, writing, doing all of these bits and pieces. But then they actually can go off and bumble off and be back into their world of play again. The other one that's very interesting is my brother runs the woodwork shop, and the woodwork shop is a perfect example. The little ones come in and they want to make a sword because there's big dragons outside that need to be sorted out here. We've got a problem, we've got orcs and goblins, we've got a problem, I need a sword and I need it quickly. That's not a time to be looking and going, right, so let's talk to you about how to do mathematics and how to measure things, because this child needs a sword quick because there's a dragon outside. So these sort of things is kind of, if you imagine how the very earlier stages of the learning happens. This is the very younger ages. But naturally, as they get older, it starts to move into timetabled subject-based learning. So the children can choose what subjects to learn or to go to. They have complete control of what it is that they want to be learning, and then they get a timetable, but they have the choice of whether to go to those lessons or not. And so that's how it works. We also at Summerhill, we offer the qualification. We offer the GCSE, which is the national qualification across the UK. Again, this is a very important thing, because from our perspective, we need to make sure that the child can follow the path that they want to follow. As we all know, some children are very ambitious. They want, they'll feel those urges to be wanting to do a specific career, whatever that is. If they want to become a doctor, become a scientist, or a musician, whatever it is that they want to be doing. And they'll have their own goals and levels that they want to be achieving, sense of achievement to a certain extent. And so, yeah, so then to go on to college or to go on to university, we offer those qualifications, and we have the teachers who can then take them through those qualifications to get them to those next steps. Cool. So I kind of already feel that maybe I should stop there. I know it's only about 20 minutes so far, but I feel that probably we're going to have quite a few questions. I've seen already there's some things here, but does anyone if people want to ask a question, I quite like it if they unmute and you can actually just ask a question rather than just putting it. There's things in the chat, but it'd be really nice if people, unmute, maybe take, if you don't mind, to take them, have your camera on as well, and we can actually say hi and have eye contact and hear each other, sort of thing. So,
anybody ready? Joe, I know you had some questions. And I also know, Henry, sometimes people will join us and they're feeding their children.
They're busy doing stuff as well, of course.
They could be, so that, a lot of times with these things, it's hard to tell, but we'll have people who are in the middle of doing something else, multitasking. Okay. So Joe can't unmute. Let me unmute. Let's see, Joe. Let me see if I can unmute you.
We can ask to unmute. I think we can ask to unmute.
Ah, you did it. Thank you.
There we go. There we go.
It's I felt my voice was stolen there for a minute, so thank you.
Yeah, we had it. We had control of you. Yeah, you didn't have freedom there, Joe.
All this talk of freedom, you got me so wound up. Now I'm feeling like an anarchist against Zoom. Henry, it's a delight just to hear you tell the stories, and I have utmost respect for the leadership Summerhill has given the world for decades, and I think it's remarkable. So I do have a host of questions, but I don't want to dominate. But on a simple level, I'm just wondering, how much time do children spend in multi-age environments? Is that all day, every day, or are there periods of separation?
I mean, we generally, as a whole community, we're always multi-age and bits and pieces like that. Now, when, for example, I'll talk in a bit more of the extremes. So when GCSEs are being done, the little children are not in the classroom whilst the GCSEs are being done for very obvious reasons. They need to be focusing, and the subject area is probably quite high for a 6-year-old when they're still in the world of dragons and and all of the other fun things and all the other fun things in the world. So there's, so for example, we have the younger children. We have an area which the age range is from 5 up till 9, and then the next one is from 9 up to 13, and then the next one's pretty much from 13 up to GCSE levels. Now, we have, and this is obviously a very important part to mention at Summerhills, we have a lot of open space. So, for example, the art room is a place where all sorts of ages, there's lots of open time where all sorts of different ages are mingling with each other. It's the same within the woodwork, for example. Our science teacher has added the same thing to the science department. So there'll often be situations where you'll have little guys and big guys all in there together, but all sort of learning together. And then it's the same with the music department as well. Sometimes things will be split because they then will focus on certain projects, but generally as a whole, there's always areas. But I think what I'll just quickly add to that, Joe, that's what I just explained is the learning environments. But actually the school community, it's always like that. The older kids obviously have an older area where they sleep, and obviously the sleeping is always segregated into different areas. But the actual community living aspect is always, everybody's always playing and hanging around together, and it's a really lovely environment in that circumstance. It's really, really nice. It's a very powerful thing. Often when I think about how the segregation of traditional education with age, I mean. It astounds me that they I mean, I know why they do that, but it's for all the wrong reasons. It's such a wonderful thing to have older and younger children all mixing together and learning off each other. It's just and I mean in the living and relationship context and social emotional development, almost more importantly than the learning, but in the learning environment as well. So powerful, so wonderful.
We know it in greater communities. And in the adult world, it's commonplace, but it's always surprising to me how we do the segregation with children.
Yeah.
I have another question for you, Henry, if I may. You alluded to a little bit with the shift in technology accessibility that's been going on since really 2007 when iPhones and smartphones became prevalent. I think your granddad was a genius in that he designed the school so it could adapt and adjust to each age.
Yeah.
But I'm just wondering, because your mom's been running it since the early 70s, and you obviously aren't a teenager. I'm wondering if this rapid shift that happened since 2007 has caused any disruption in some of those systems that worked so well in 1990, but in 2010, the world changed so much.
It changed, and it changed quickly. There's no doubt about it. I mean, I remember, I think it was an Atari ST, I think was the first computer I had when I was a pupil at Summerhill. And that was many, many years ago. And it was a huge change, actually. But children are phenomenal when you actually trust in them. And especially, I think especially to a certain extent, we are very lucky, and I'm gonna say that we're, Summerhill is in a wonderful situation that we have those multiple age, those multi ages. We have, and it seems a weird way of saying it, but phenomenal wisdom happening at Summerhill. And what I mean by that is we have children who come to Summerhill at 5 and 6 years old, and they are being instinctive. They're being trusted. They're free. They're doing they're doing all of those things, that they're playing around with all of these bits and pieces that are around them. They're discovering the world. And we have laws at Summerhill, but I'll come back to this actually. But what happens is that those 5-year-olds live in that situation, and the phone comes in, or the iPad, the first phone that's about as big as this. Hello, and it comes in, and they're playing with it. And I'm going to use the word playing because that's as in terms of discovery. That's what they're doing. They're playing with it. They're finding out all the things that are good about them and bad about them, and then they're doing it in a phenomenally quick period of time because they're playing with them. And then they're becoming older. They're experiencing the goods and the bads around this thing called the phone that's this big, or whatever that is, or the internet, or social media, or whatever those things are. And they're playing, and they're experiencing these things, and then they become 15, 16, and they've been through it. They've done it. They know. The best people to ask about what is, if you want the best screening policy in the world, you ask our carriage kids. You ask the children who have been at Summerhill from 5 years old up until 16 years old, and they've exactly as you said, since 2007, they've lived freely, experimenting and playing with these things. So I'll just, in result to that, I'll just explain this at the moment. We have a law. The law around screening at the moment is that you're not allowed to screen between 5 in the morning and 4 in the afternoon for kind of non-important reasons. Now, there's an exact wording which evolves a little bit, and so I don't quite remember the exact wording in the law book. But basically, if you really need to do something, if you're studying something, if you're researching something, if you're, we have some kids who are developing computer games, and this is a process of creativity. Now, but sometimes they're just watching YouTube videos, or they're just, that sort of downtime, if you will. They then do that from sort of 4 o'clock into the evening, and on weekends they're allowed to, but during meal times they're not allowed to. So now all of these things that I'm explaining, we have opinions about. We should. I'm sure that everybody will have opinions about. But what's so magical about this is that in fact, the law that's there at the moment has been there for nearly 12 or so years, and it works. And when sometimes we've had situations where children have thought, no, I want to drop the law. I want the freedom to just screen as much as I want, and I want to just free. The reality is, and it's happened that happened for a very short period of time, but quite quickly the community brought it back. And they brought it back for a reason. They brought it back because actually we all know that the gaming industry is one of the biggest industries in the world. I don't personally like to use the word addictive, but we know that they are going, come and play with me, come and play with me. And when you're a very little child, it's quite easy to get sucked into that, is the reality. And that is a very, very strong reality. And so the community, even the little ones, actually quite like the fact of having restriction. So you know, and when you're in a community of 100 people and these decisions are coming up, it's not because there's 12 adults who are all manipulating all of the children to change it, because you know how that would roll. We'll be outvoted in a minute. The adults think we should all go to lessons now, and the kids would go, come on, you know. So they own their freedom. They take on their freedom, you know. So yeah, so it's a very powerful thing. And the older children as well, they, you know, and they will sometimes, they may propose that they're an exception. We've had a situation where a staff is doing an online training course and they would like to propose that they're an exception to the screening law. Well, online training is actually part of education anyway. So there's ways of doing things like that, to individualize it, for it to work very well with the community. But it's a phenomenal thing. It's a phenomenal thing. And I'm, you know, still, and this is quite a funny one as well, I think about AI. And I think, you know, it's coming. We know it's coming. And I'm sitting here as an old bean, 45 years old, thinking, I don't want to touch it with a barge pole. I don't agree with it. I'm scared of it. I think the kids will know what to do. They will be able to make the right decisions about it. They will play with it. They might make a few mistakes. Hence what I think it was Gina who mentioned earlier, that learning from mistakes is important to make mistakes. But if you give them the ball to play with, then they will find out what is okay to do with that ball and what's not okay to do with that ball, because that's their job. That's their program, more than any adult can ever direct and put their imposed wisdom upon. Children will find out. They will know. They know how to do it. And so to a certain extent, thinking about what A.S.Neill trusted in children, and that simple thing of trusting in children, having that freedom. It's important to have equality, and it's important for them to have a system to be able to make decisions about their social life. And it's very important that they have that. If it is that adults are doing things like that, then you don't have that wonderful beauty, the wonderful, beautiful freedom that the children have. And it's a very powerful thing, very powerful thing. Mm-hmm.
Just to give you a quick time check, Henry, we'll move into the second set of sessions at 7:45. Well, in about, see, my math is terrible.
10-15 minutes.
Yeah, so
no problem.
We can do about 10 more minutes, and then we want.
Oh, of course. That's absolutely fine. I always feel like I want to apologize because I always get a bit excited about answers. And that's the problem, Joe. You see, Joe had 2 questions so far, and I've already taken up most of the session. You see, he's probably got more. He's sitting there with his pen, writing down more. Or if anyone else have any questions, of course, please do.
And if you do have a question, you need to let me know in the text that you want me to unmute you, because I can't see you waving at me.
Exactly. But of course, if you want to type a question into the chat, that's absolutely fine as well. But
Henry, how do parents know that their kids are learning with there's so much free play? You know, a parent chooses to send their kid to Summerhill and they know the story of the school at this point. But, you know, I imagine you went through school at Summerhill, correct?
Yeah.
You know, how did you prepare? You know, did you need to do any other credentialing, or was there any alternative diploma or anything like that that sort of signified, yes, Henry is prepared to go to university or whatever path you chose after school?
I think a few things. First of all, I think it's very important to remember that the education at Summerhill is purely individual. And it's very important that that's the case. So I can tell you about my story, but every other child would have had quite a different story. So I did do qualifications at Summerhill, but I was a very social person. I was very interested in music at the time. And I did qualifications at Summerhill, but I I didn't exactly know what I wanted to do next in my life. Now, and this is something I can reflect on quite importantly about the attitudes at Summerhill, is that whenever we're talking about what happens after Summerhill, we talk about after Summerhill rather than a career choice. You don't choose a career that you're going to spend for the rest of your life. You choose what you're going to do next, because it may be sometimes, if I talk about my younger brother, he was a farmer at the age of 4 years old, and he's now 35 and he's still a farmer. But for me, I didn't quite know. I knew I loved music. I was passionate about music. So I went to college. I got qualifications at Summerhill. I went to college. I did further education at college, but I didn't exactly know at that time what I wanted to do. And it was till I got to 21, I think, if I remember correctly, that I found sound engineering as an actual subject. It wasn't offered to me at school or even at college, actually. So I found a university that, or a private university that focused on sound engineering. And that's then where I went. And then I ran a recording studio for 15 years. I had a very wonderful career as a sound engineer running a recording studio. Later on, I then started to teach music at Summerhill, and then found out that I had more interest in education rather than I did in music, even though I've got music behind me. So my journey changed a little bit as I went along.
But I guess you would say that Summerhill prepared you well for following your own individual path and allowing it to grow as you grew.
To a certain extent, being confident in myself, I think, is the most important thing, to actually make those decisions. I think the fact that children often in traditional education will feel that they're on the road. Oh my, I'm coming up to 16-year-old, I've got to make a decision of my career choice, and then I've got to go to university, and then I've got to stay in that career for the rest of my life. That's not and shouldn't ever really be, especially for children. It's a very important aspect of it. I'll just quickly mention something else that you, Mara, that you asked about, was to do with the parents' attitudes. How do they know what is going on? It is very, very important that they understand the Summerhill philosophy. And to a certain extent, it's very important for this as well, to come to terms with the Summerhill philosophy, because the reality is there has to be a sense of trust in the school, and by giving trust to the school, you're then giving trust to the child. And it's a very important part. But obviously, sometimes, you know, they will question, they'll be wondering about it. They might be a bit anxious because they still live in the world where anxiety to do with my child at 6 years old hasn't learned how to read and write. And actually, it's okay. It will come, and it's okay, sort of thing. So we support them a lot in this process. Actually, it's a very important part. That they always can get in contact with us with questions, and we often will have little sessions where we're talking to them about it, and, you know, to support them through the journey, so that the outside expectational pressure sort of driven educational system doesn't drive them to be thinking, but my child needs to learn how to read and write, and be rigid with anxiety, because actually, well, it's funny actually, when you look historically, A.S.Neill wrote about the idea that that someone may leave Summerhill who couldn't read and write, but actually it hasn't happened for I don't know. I mean, to my knowledge, even going back to my time, I don't remember anybody who actually left the school. So for a good 40 years, it's never happened that a child has left the school who couldn't read and write. But I mean, maybe to a certain extent, coming back to the first discussion with Joe there, that screens, I mean, actually, they're learning how to read and write all the time. It just happens, you know. So, but anyway, sorry, I'll Stu.
Yeah, so no kind of marks, no kind of record, but you talked about taking qualifications, and I'm guessing I translated that as some kind of an exam. You sat an exam to say that you were prepared.
The GCSEs. Well, I think the way we do that might be different to the US, is that it is subject based, but we have in English we have college, we have GCSEs, and then you have A levels, and then you have university. So and I know that in the US it goes up to, I think you go up to 18, am I right? And then they go straight to university.
They
The
could,
national
they have to
qualification.
qualify to get in. They have to take
Yeah,
assessment,
of
and
course,
it's
of course.
changing, but
And that's the same. That's the same for England as well. Yeah, to get into a college, you might need 5 or so GCSEs at grade 7 or something like that, and then you choose at Summerhill. They choose the subjects, but they go through and they take the qualifications. The teachers, they have syllabuses that they go through, and then they have to fulfill the exam and pass the exam. There's a lot of work that goes into it, actually, and but the kids are no problem. They're ready because they fulfilled the other parts of their childhood to a certain extent, so they're ready to do the work and take on that responsibility.
Henry, we have about a minute left, and I don't know if you can answer Joe's quick question quickly. He just wants to know, are your kids as depressed as kids are here in the US?
Sorry, do you mean what
Well,
was that?
he's talking about, go ahead, Joe, unmute yourself and
All right, there you go, free again. Well, mainly, Henry, I just wanted to know, does the community that Summerhill creates also help your children feel a part of something bigger than themselves at such a level that the trends we're seeing, at least in the US, towards high levels of depression and suicide and lack of engagement in community, are those trends less evident in your school? I want to believe they are. I want to believe you're a blue zone of schools.
But hence why, Joe, when I do talks about Summerhill generally, I very rarely talk about education, and I mean learning, the classroom and what happens within the learning. It is by far the least important thing, by far the least important thing. And I have seen this from the time I've been at Summerhill, when I was a pupil myself, the experience I had myself for the now 35 years that I've been a part of Summerhill School, externally, and then as an adult, and then as, in every way, the most important thing that the social emotional development is fulfilled in the child, that they feel confident, that they feel independent, that they feel that they understand relationships, that they understand feelings, and they understand feelings. I mean, how powerful is that? It is so important. And it's not all the time everything happy and wonderful. It absolutely isn't. It's not all bad. If people look, you wouldn't see lots of bad things happen. But the reality is that disappointment, hatred, anger, these are part of our life. These are emotions and feelings that are a part of our life. And it's very important that children experience these things, experience disappointment, and experience that why isn't the whole community voting with me? Why can't I do exactly what I want? And, they've got to experience these things. And what's so beautiful about Summerhill is because we allow these things, they happen in a very small kind of context, but it means that they're experienced. And it's absolutely fundamental. If I was going to say that the thing that the world is lacking the most in is that often with childhood, we think about learning and we're not focusing on social emotional development. And I would put that down as the fundamental thing every time. So yeah, generally an hour and a half on social emotional development and 10 minutes on learning.
Henry, thank you so much for giving us your time. What a rare opportunity for us to actually get a chance to talk with you about your work and the legacy of your grandfather. So if you're with us and you're going to join another session, you've actually got 2 minutes to leave and go out to another session. You can choose from listening to Michael Strong from the Socratic Seminar or Amy Moratz from Awakening Spirit School. And I hope you'll stick around and come and join us it'll be 8:30 here. It'll be our closing keynote when Steve and I will pull things back together and talk about all the things we heard. Thank you, Henry. And please go visit Summerhill School's website and learn more about their big celebration for this year.
Yes, the Summerhill Festival of Childhood happening in August. Summerhillfestival.com.
Thank you, Henry. Okay, everybody, be well. See you in another session. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.